Good morning. I want to begin this morning by thanking our sign language interpreters. I usually do that at the end. Michael Albert and David Jones, thank you for joining us. And thank you to Sheriff Tom Dart and Cook County Emergency Management and Regional Security Director Bill Barnes for joining me today. We're experiencing civil unrest during what has already been a difficult few months for our communities. By now, much of the world has watched in horror as a police officer knelt on George Floyd's neck until he took his last breath. Over the weekend, thousands of protesters have flooded the streets to call out that injustice, the injustice not only of George Floyd's death, but the injustices inflicted upon Black and brown people for generations. But it's important to recognize the difference between protesting and looting and vandalism. I stand with the individuals who exercised their right to protest and transformed their anger and frustration into political action. But we have to understand that the looting and the vandalism provide ammunition to those who want to marginalize, discredit, diminish our critique of America. As I said yesterday, we cannot allow looting and vandalism to define us. There's so much to discuss, but I'm here this morning with Sheriff Dart to discuss the events that transpired over the weekend and what he and our Department of Emergency Management and Regional Security have done as the unrest has continued. Lastly, I'd like to ask everyone who chooses to peacefully protest to stay safe. We cannot forget that we're in the middle of a global pandemic that has already taken more than 100,000 lives in our own country and 400,000 lives worldwide. I want to thank everyone who wore masks as they peacefully protested over the weekend and who are choosing to remain responsibly quarantined afterward. Now I'd like to turn it over to Sheriff Dart.
Thank you, Tony. Bill, I just at the outset want to make a point of letting you know, Tony and the folks from Homeland Security have been so amazingly helpful, not just here with the unrest, but with the pandemic and the issues that have been going on throughout the country, throughout the world, for now going on 3 or 4 months. I lose track of time. So I just can't thank them enough. They have been so amazingly helpful. And they have been as well here. And I really cannot tell you how I echo what Tony just said. I mean, she nailed it. To the peaceful protesters, please continue your peaceful protesting. You have every right to do that. You are justified into it. With the horrific thing that occurred in Minneapolis, please continue your peaceful protesting to have these issues raised in the appropriate way so change can, in fact, happen. But what we can't do is we can't conflate that with people who are affirmatively committing criminal acts on purpose. So this notion that someone might have that some of these criminal acts are individuals who are peacefully protesting and then there's something that changes it and it flips into something more violent, that is not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is there are peaceful protesters who are so thoughtful, trying to get their voices heard on issues so important. And then there's another group. They have no intention of protesting whatsoever. Their only goal is to utilize these groups of people, the peaceful protesters, for their own criminal acts. And we've just seen it playing out. Whether you're talking in the city of Chicago, you're talking about suburban Cook County, we're seeing it everywhere. And the last few days, much like all law enforcement agencies, we have been called everywhere to do virtually everything. And it's been very, very difficult. It's been difficult for everybody involved, and I don't think anybody who's thoughtful would suggest otherwise. Our role is more of a role of trying to be all things to all people at different places and different times. So we have been called from the city of Chicago, working both in the downtown, South Loop area to the west side of the city of Chicago. We've been assisting CPD, taking over some people's roles while they do other things. the state police who have been brought in to do marvelous work in downtown area primarily. We've been doing a lot of work now, taking over highways and doing different things that they have done over the years. But then we're working with our suburban police departments. Many of them are handling things on their own, but for the vast majority of them, these extraordinary acts of looting and vandalism are something that no one department can handle. So ourselves and others are coming in to assist. And in doing that, we've activated days ago our command center so that we can plot everything out, know where everything's at, know where we can send people. But then we've brought in people who otherwise would be on their days off, vacations, you name it. And so we've added an additional 400 or 500 additional officers out to the streets as well. Yesterday afternoon and night was particularly difficult, particularly chaotic. We were from, as I said, from the city of Chicago to suburbs all around Cook County. Primarily, we were active in the west suburbs and the south suburbs. And it was just very difficult. And my heart goes out to these store owners, people who were just crawling up from the pandemic and being shut down for months, now have seen their entire investment destroyed, just destroyed. I was myself and the rest of my office was fielding calls all day yesterday from people looking for our help and assistance, trying to get out there as well as we could, but yet being pulled in many other directions. And so, I mean, I have laundry lists of towns and villages that we were engaged with. There has been a bit of a calm right now, and we are appreciative of that. We do not know what tonight and tomorrow will hold. We are monitoring that as we speak. We have a plan, as the other departments do as well, on how we're going to confront this. But I just want to emphasize our law enforcement officers that I've been interacting with have been nothing but professional, clearly distinguishing the difference between people who are protesting, peacefully protesting, and people who are committing criminal acts. So that has been obvious to me. The net result of this is going to be more people taken into custody. That's the other hat I wear as well. We know there's been arrests now in well over 1,000. I don't know if it's 1,400, 1,500. It's hard because of the number of them to get the exact gravity of it right now. How many of them are going to end up coming to the jail? How many we're going to have to house? We're working through all that right now. As we all know, that because of the pandemic, it's presented loads of different challenges to us, as well as some lawsuits that were really outrageously unnecessary and not helpful. And so we are going through all the different configurations to how we could deal with any type of arrest where they are not able to make bond because of their actions. I've made it clear to people, there has been tremendous work done by Tony and other folks, myself, to make sure that the jail was no longer a place where we dump the mentally ill and the poor. The jail has been now a jail that harbors people charged with violent crimes. These acts out on the street are violent crimes. We will find space for people. Disorderly conducts, misdemeanors like that, no. They'll be bonded out. They'll be bonded out by the police stations. But for individuals committing violent acts, we will find places for you in the jail. We will make sure that there is a place available for them, and that we will make sure that they are safely separated from the COVID as well as we can do in that congregate setting. But I just want that to be clear. Just because of the issues with COVID, it doesn't mean that there's an ability where people are going to be able to walk free. That's not going to happen. So I just want to thank everybody who's been so helpful throughout this. We don't know where the end is right now, but we are prepared and we'll continue to do what we're doing. And I know, Bill, I think you were going to.
Thanks, Sheriff Dart, for your kind words, and thank you, Madam President, for your leadership in these extremely challenging times. Again, my name is Bill Barnes. I'm the Executive Director of Cook County's Emergency Management and Regional Security. And like so many of you, I was heartened as the weekend began, and I watched people from all walks of life come together and in Chicago and the surrounding communities and peacefully protest the horrendous murder of George Floyd. And unfortunately, as has been indicated, and as everyone has seen, those protests were replaced by agitators, and violence and looting began to erupt throughout our communities, mirroring what we've seen throughout the county or throughout the nation and the world. As we've seen in just the past few weeks, a new emergency doesn't wait for an old emergency to end. We are racked in the middle, we're stuck in the middle of a pandemic, and in the middle of that, we've faced flooding, and now we are faced with the challenges of community and chaos. It's the responsibility of the Cook County Department of Emergency Management and Regional Security to handle multiple incidents at any given time. So to facilitate that, we activated our Emergency Operations Center, where you are today, to respond to the chaos that we had seen in our communities beginning Saturday night. We wanted to ensure that we could provide all of Cook County's 135 municipalities with reliable information in real time so that they could make informed decisions and protect their entire communities, including the peaceful protesters whose First Amendment rights we must safeguard. Our department always has a rotation of duty officers and responders available to consult with municipalities and deploy during evolving events in order to ensure the safety of our residents. We also gather and share information with our partners around the region and the state. Now, long before this pandemic hit, the relationship between emergency management and the sheriff's office was a strong one. We worked together to invest federal funds to strengthen the county's communications capacity, ensure that all regional law enforcement partners could communicate in their time of need. We support each other during normal operations and emergencies. In addition to manning the Emergency Operations Center during the COVID-19 pandemic, this weekend saw increased collaboration between us and the Sheriff's Office. Not only did we share information, we also coordinated law enforcement response to ensure the safety, again, of all of our residents. Our EOC remains activated this morning as we monitor civil unrest while we continue to focus efforts on our response to COVID-19, plan for possible inclement weather later this week, and maintain our standard operations. We do this with the safety and security of all of our residents in mind. And with that, I'll turn it over to Madam President for questions. Thank you.
All right, who do we have on? Greg?
Yeah, this is Greg Hines at Crank Chicago Business. Mr. Sheriff, let me start with you. Can you give us any numbers, sir, on how many people are being held at the jail in relation to arrests from this weekend, and how many might have already been bonded out?
All right, so the question is from Greg Hines, Sheriff. It's what's the number of people held in the jail as a result of the unrest over the last few days, and how many have bonded out? Now, my understanding is that some people bond out at the police stations, and so the sheriff might not have that information.
To the extent he does.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Greg, we've had so far about 50 people bond out as a result of this. We have another 60 who are being held as a result of either not being able to make their bond or there is a no bond set. And as Tony referenced, I mentioned as well, the extraordinary circumstances paperwork is taking a bit of time. We know that the actual number of arrests over the course of the last day or two is definitely, over 1,000 for sure. It's probably closer to 2,000. How much of those arrests are disorderly conduct type arrests where literally they're brought into the local police station, they are allowed to post an I-bond at that police station, so we'll never get them at the jail. Those numbers will come, but I guarantee you, Greg, they're going to be slow to get those numbers out for the next day or two for sure. But as far as the ones we're seeing, I think we're planning on another 150 or so tomorrow in that range. But it's a little bit of a fuzzy number right now, but it was slow at first, but we're going to be getting bigger numbers coming in the next
Understood.
48.
One other question, if I could, both for President Preckwinkle and for the sheriff. There had been some suggestions from the mayor and others that a lot of the violence that's going on and the looting is not spontaneous expressions of passion, but organized perhaps by outside groups. Could each of you tell me what you have seen, whether you're aware of any organized activity, and if so, who's organized it?
You know, Greg, it's a great question. There's definitely organization. As far as an overarching organization, that is definitely being looked at. But on a more micro level, it's definitely organized. Yesterday in North Riverside, there was anywhere between 750 to 1,000 people looted that mall. There was no peaceful protest that any of us were aware of going on anywhere near there. It was a concerted effort. People went there with a plan and hit it. And so that group itself was well organized. Whether or not it had bigger tentacles, we're working on that. A lot of these other ones, we spent a great deal of time as well yesterday and last night in Harvey. There was a definite organized group of people between 20 and 40-ish that hit an entire strip of stores and just devastated them. Very well organized. But as far as that more overarching one, we're working on it. We've been working extensively with our federal partners as well, who have been incredibly helpful. And all these different parts of it are being looked at.
President Preckwinkle, same question to you, if you could.
You know, my observation is that there are three groups of people on the street. First of all, the protesters who have called out the injustice of George Floyd's murder and the racism and discrimination that have plagued our country from its inception. They're agitators whose purpose is not so much to call out the injustice as it is to create chaos. And then there are the looters. And I think under different circumstances, one or the other of those groups predominates. Are there other?
Did you know who might be organizing it? I mean, there's been talk about white supremacists. There's been talk about Antifa. Do you have any idea who's doing it?
I have no idea. No idea whatsoever. All right, are there other?
Preckwinkle, can you talk about what your thoughts are on the police response? Was it correct? Was it adequate? Was it too much or not enough?
Who's this, Rachel?
Yes.
All right, so Rachel Hinton's question is, can I comment on the police response? No, I think that it's inappropriate for me to do that, and I don't have sufficient information about the various ways in which the police have responded across the city or across the county.
How would you grade, I guess, Mayor Lightfoot's handling of this situation?
So the question is, how would I grade Mayor Lightfoot's handling? I don't grade other elected officials. I work hard to do my job well. That's what's on my plate.
Do you think that Chris responded to this adequately?
Pardon me?
Do you believe that you responded to this adequately?
As I said, I don't grade other elected officials. All right, Kristen?
Yeah, I just was wondering, I know, just thinking about the suburbs, for the Cook County Public Health Department, how concerned are you or your public health officials about a spike in COVID cases, considering the numbers of people who were out over the weekend? And is there anything the county is doing to prevent that?
Okay, so the question is, given the number of people who are out this weekend, what's the impact on the ongoing pandemic? I'm sure that we'll see a spike in cases. I commend the demonstrators who are out and who wore masks, but clearly not everyone did. And of course, not all the people who were out on the streets over the weekend were either protesters or agitators or looters. So as it was a beautiful weekend, and I saw lots of folks out when I was out and about, and not all of them were wearing masks, and not all of them were maintaining social distancing. And I think as we attempt to open up Illinois in stages, we have to be very, very cautious that we aren't heightening the impact of the pandemic by our carelessness.
Right. Is the county doing anything? I know that you're hiring potentially lots, hundreds of contact tracers. Is the county doing anything to just, monitor more things, over the next few weeks or so, just to see if there's a spike in cases or to try and contain any of them?
Well, the county the Cook County Department of Public Health works with the state Department of Public Health, IDPH. We don't have the capacity to enforce either shelter-in-place orders or good common sense advice about wearing masks or washing your hands, or of course sheltering in place. So we count on the good judgment of our residents to adhere to those public health protocols. And to the extent they don't, we don't have the capacity to address that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Greg, Rachel, Kristen, is there anyone else on the line?
Hi, good morning. This is Alex Nathan of the Daily Line.
All right, Alex.
A couple questions. I was wondering if I could start with one for Director Barnes. If you could just go into a little more detail about how EMRS is collaborating with suburban police departments and with the sheriff's office. You mentioned sharing some information from the command center. Can you talk a little more about what kind of information is being shared and what that collaboration looks like?
Okay, this is Alex from the Daily Line, and he wants to know about collaboration with the sheriff's office and our local police forces.
Sure thing, a great question. I think it's easy to say that the work that we were engaged in over the weekend mirrors that which we do every day. It is in our interest and it's our mission to ensure that all of our municipalities have as much information as possible so that they can be proactive for issues before they become problems and have to react. So the type of information that we share on any given day, let alone a night like last night, concerns ground truth. What is exactly happening in that community? What are we hearing from all of our stakeholders, be it at the state level, even at the federal level, and from our county partners at the sheriff's office, so that our local communities can anticipate the problems that are headed their way and then proactively mitigate those problems. Case in point, just any flood. When we see the rains coming in certain weather patterns, and we know that the rain is going to fall at a certain rate in a certain area, we reach out to those communities that we know are historically impacted by floods to let them know that the water is headed their way and how can we help. We have pumps at the ready. We have sandbags at the ready. Can we bring them to you? We do this. We did the same thing last night. We understand that there is unrest at a certain location within your community. How can we help? It's that type of collaboration that we have established over the many years of the operation of this department and that we're able to leverage in more difficult times such as this.
So then what kind of resources are being provided by EMRS? Where would be sandbags for flooding? What kinds of resources are being provided to manage unrest?
Again, good question. Thankfully, there were not any resource requests over the weekend. I can say that there were no communities that had needs that were unmet. But the types of assets that we could deploy if needed were, number one, intelligence. What do we know based upon our the relationships that we develop with our public safety stakeholders? We have physical assets that we can deploy into a town to help establish command and control, meaning to give a forward operating base where law enforcement, public safety can create a common operating picture and direct the ongoing operations, those types of assets. And personnel. We can deploy personnel to assist communities in making the decisions that they need to make in challenging times such as this.
President Preckwinkle, Greg Hines and Cranes again. When we get on the other side of this, when the violence calms down, hopefully, everybody has talked about the need for change, that this is a moment that we shouldn't waste to make some changes to deal with racism and police conduct, whatever. At the county level, at the state level, what 2 or 3 changes do you think would really help? What are you going to push for? What give some specific actions that are needed?
So the question is, what specific actions are needed? Well, first of all, we need more accountability for police conduct. It's not just a problem in Minneapolis. You know, I talk frequently about the fact that Jason Van Dyke was charged with murder, but he was the first police officer in 35 years in the city of Chicago to be charged with murder. And, you know, black and brown people are murdered by the police across this country every day. It's routine. And unfortunately, it happens often in Chicago as well. It's not a once every 35-year occurrence. So the first thing that I would say is that we need to focus more on police accountability, not just here in Chicago, but across the country. And I, being an elected official in a democracy, I always focus on the importance of civic engagement and political involvement. And clearly, you know, we have a white nationalist president, and as I've said before, those of us who believe that that doesn't reflect the values of our great nation need to be working hard in November to change our federal leadership.
When you say that we need more police accountability, what specific laws ought to be passed? Do we need a civilian review board that's independent? Do we need a different police chief? Do we need a different method to select the police chief? What specific bills or legislation do you want here?
You know, I think that's something I'm not prepared to talk about at the moment. You know, I followed some of the police accountability work of grassroots organizations, and I think that we need to look more closely at the suggestions that they've made. We clearly have some challenges in terms of internal affairs in the police department. I know this because I know people who used to work there and who have shared that that department engages in cover-ups as well as thorough investigations. So we've got some real challenges, I think, across the board in terms of training, in particular for police officers. You know, we train people at the academy and then do very little training after that. You know, in whatever profession you're in, professional development is always an important part of professional advancement and ensuring the quality of your workforce. And we haven't invested that in the city of Chicago. So those are, I think, some examples of what we need, not just here, but across the country.
I think we're good.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us.
Can I ask one more? Sorry, this is Alex listening to you. I was wondering if President Preckwinkle could talk about what kind of role you see the county playing in helping businesses, in particular that have experienced property damage, like some of those in the suburbs that Sheriff Dart mentioned, either through the community recovery initiative that's about to get underway, or any other just role that you see the county playing in helping businesses that have experienced that kind of property damage or other issues.
Okay, so the question is how we're going to help businesses. The county's resources have to be directed in the suburbs. Our federal support is specifically designated for suburban Cook. cookcountyil.gov/recovery. That's cookcountyil.gov/recovery is the source of information that we can provide to help and support businesses. We have a technical assistance network that is a partnership with the Illinois Business Immigration Coalition, the Illinois Restaurant Association, and the National Partnership for New Americans to provide information to businesses across the county about federal and state support that's available to them. And again, we have resources available particularly to suburban Cook County businesses, gig workers, and not-for-profits through a $10 million loan program that provides $20,000 in loans to small businesses of 25 employees or less, and $10,000 loans to gig workers. And these are 5-year, zero-interest loans.
Bill wanted to follow up on that.
All right. Bill Barnes had one further comment.
My fact checkers called me out. I misspoke previously. We did just deploy an asset over the night to North Riverside to support a homicide investigation at the mall there. But I stand by the statement that there are no unmet needs in the suburban Cook County right now.
What was the asset?
It was, again, a command and control asset, a unified command post that helps establish radio communications and allows all the public safety stakeholders to get together and plan next steps.